First item of business, 1.1, conflict of interest declaration. Does anybody have anything appearing on today's agenda that creates a conflict? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on. We'll welcome back our old friend Stan Ashby from the sunny south, and so nice to see Stan back. Okay, we have the agenda, adoption of the agenda. Any addition? Roger?
One addition, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to add discussions on contracts and RFPs to ensure that they get into the minutes into the future.
Councillor Avery.
Thank you, Worship. It doesn't necessarily have to be added on to this week's agenda, maybe for our next council meeting, but if we can have council prepare a breakdown of our tax assessment. I'm getting a lot of concerns of 15 to 17% increases on this year's taxes. So just to give administration some time to prepare for our next council meeting.
Any other additions to today's agenda then? Councillor Simpson, you move the agenda then as amended. All in favor? Okay. All right. Then we have 3.1, the budget meeting minutes of February 26, 2018. Councillor Chapman.
Thank you, Worship. I'll make a motion for acceptance of those minutes, and I just more of a side note that if they could add a street sweeper into their capital budget for the future would be lovely.
So you move those minutes as presented. All in favor? And 3.2, the regular council meeting minutes of May 28, 2018. Councillor Chapman.
I'll move as amended. There's Thank you, Worship. I'll move as amended. There is one point in here, and I haven't looked it up right off, but I think Brianne had sent a note to Len on the spelling change.
That's item in the agenda package. That's not in the minutes.
Okay.
So the minutes are fine. I don't think there's any amendments to the minutes. So you'll move the minutes as presented?
As presented, thank you.
All in favor? All right, and then we have item 4.1. We have the cannabis survey results from the, well, they must be big results. We got 3 people presenting. Do you pull a straw on who has to do it, or?
You're just strategizing on how to get out from the tight quarters.
Well, I thought you'd make the intern do it.
That would be nice today. Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of council. Keep the discussion on the survey results for the cannabis matter fairly brief. As you'll see in your package, overall, the opinion of the community from an attitudinal perspective is fairly split regarding those for and those opposed to the overall idea of legalizing cannabis and the ways that it could impact the community and the locally controllable elements of cannabis in a broader sense. A couple of things I'd like to point out include the let me just get my bearings here. Include the planning and development considerations. It's proposed that we hold off on any detailed discussion regarding that side of things until we're done the whole gamut of engagement activities that we have mapped out. And to that end, we've suggested that there is very little interest in the working group applications that were open to the community up until June 8th. So in lieu of that, it's suggested that we have skip that section and go right on to workshops. We've already had tentatively quite a good response on the organizational side. We have representatives from the Alberta Health Services and AGLC that would be willing to and happy to attend those workshops if that's the wish of council to move on to that next step. In addition to that, one of the findings where there was a fairly high level of consensus based on the survey results was the idea of restricting consumption to either private property or cannabis lounges. And so at this time it's suggested that in order to align with the potential date of July 1st as a legalization date, staff could start drafting a consumption bylaw that's focused on private property being the only place where it's currently allowed to be consumed in Coaldale. Of course, we're open to suggestions and look forward to further direction from council on that. Thank you.
Any questions for the Councillor Avery?
Thank you, Worship. So Spencer, if there is no bylaw in place by July 1st, does that mean it's no consumption within the town or the corporate limits of the town?
Through the chair to Councillor Avery, that we're not 100% clear on yet. I guess the one side would be if it's consumption everywhere, that would be a concern. If it's no consumption, it may or may not be less of a concern from council's perspective.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Chapman?
Thank you, Worship. Through to Spencer again, with your public engagement, were you looking for a specific number of people that would advise?
Again, through the chair to Councillor Chapman, for the working groups, it's always nice to have more than the 3 or 4 that had applied. For something like a community workshop where you can open up the discussion to anybody who wishes to attend, and the idea that we can have experts there as well in their respective fields is more the goal, to have an open invitation, a broader discussion about the topic.
Councillor Simpson?
How soon do you think you get that workshop organized and together and out?
Through the chair to Councillor Simpson, we've had quite a good discussion with a number of the organizational experts, and they're all, the stars have aligned in that regard. They're all free on June 18th, which is next Monday. That's a little bit quick, but we'll do, if the wish is to have that date be the date that we hold the workshops, we'll do everything that we can to make sure the community is aware of and able to participate.
What time would it be at?
Likely in the evening. It seems like it's usually easier for folks if things are in the evening.
I think this all kind of evidences the fact that we're trying to move at the speed of the federal government, and it's a shame that they weren't a little bit more robust in their legalization efforts. So the smaller communities don't have to do all this heavy lifting and whatnot. It's quite an onus on us when we're having to look at something like that, especially when you have something that's kind of split right down the middle of, and more of an ethical situation. And I'd rather deal with property taxes than these kind of things. Councillor Holm, were you reaching for your, okay, Councillor Jumpman?
Thank you, Worship. Just moving into the into the workshop stage, are you looking at any other input from other considered bylaws that might be prudent for us to consider in that purpose?
Through the chair to Councillor Chapman, if I understand your question, are you talking about other bylaws that the town currently has in place, or other bylaws that would be of a broader reach provincially?
Of a broader reach. So, for example, the city of Calgary has certain restrictions, and just in talking with Cameron Mills the other day, ideas about other municipalities, including Cardston, who are creating not just 100-meter zones, you know, but up to 300 meters, you know. So I guess what I'd be interested in is something more of a standard throughout the province that becomes a real template. You know, it just, in a way, almost pits one community against another for restrictions or no restrictions.
If I may, Mr. Chair, would Cam Mills be able to speak as well?
Thank you. So one of the tools that Coaldale has at their disposal, obviously, is access to the Old Man River Regional Services Commission. So through the commission, they've engaged in this type of process for 40 or so other municipalities in the area. So we'd certainly draw on the experience throughout that organization. Obviously, access to the planners from those areas, and definitely able to bring to the table a sense of what the other communities in the area are doing, without sort of really clearly suggesting what one community versus another is doing. There is no provincial standard, unfortunately, but there is a collection of information with respect to both what other municipalities are looking at doing or have already done, or what some of the guidelines are from organizations like Alberta Health Services and the AGLC and that sort of thing. So there's a lot of information out there, and that'll certainly be part of what's presented to the community.
Councillor Simpson?
I'd like to go ahead with that work. My personal thing is go ahead with the workshop on the Monday, next week Monday, but I would really like that bylaw for the June 25th meeting. I think that's something we need to jump on.
Okay, so I hear a motion from Councillor Simpson to accept the workshop recommendation. Is that right?
Yeah.
Any question around authorizing the workshop? Okay, I'll call the question. All in favor? Okay, and then I guess the next item on the...
Then also approving the bylaw for June, or approving to go forward to make the bylaw for the June 25th meeting.
Okay, so you direct the administration to bring forward a bylaw at the next meeting, and then I guess the only thing would be with regard to that on how restrictive do you want it to be. I think I heard a proposal that maybe from Spencer, you can correct me, but you were saying restricted to private property, and then the question is whether we restrict it to private property just in that way or private property indoors. Is that right?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. If I may, so just to clarify, it is the consumption bylaw that we're speaking about. And just to add a point to Councillor Avery's question at the beginning, the idea of the local bylaw is also that it's something that's locally enforceable. Otherwise, we don't have a good grasp on what the province is going to allow or require our police force or our peace officers to enforce.
Councillor Avery?
Thank you, Worship. So you're saying our peace officers are going to enforce through a bylaw a federal piece of legislation. Is that correct?
No. Well, if it's anything like the tobacco bylaws or the locally enforceable bylaws we have for other consumption of other substances in Coaldale.
It just seems pretty, very complicated when the federal government doesn't know what they're doing. We don't know what they're doing. The provincial government has passed it down to the municipal government, and now we're trying to cover up for the provincial government's shortfall on putting any type of act or legislation in place. So I'm not in favor of doing a bylaw until the province steps up and does something so we know who's going to enforce it, how they're going to enforce it, what's the fines involved in this process. Thank you.
Do you have any feedback, either Cameron or Spencer, on that?
It is very complicated, unfortunately. So
Well, I echo Councillor Avery's sentiment. I mean, and Councillor Chapman alluded to it, it's this way it's rolling out is a potpourri of stuff all throughout Canada. I mean, people are going to be just at the mercy of local bylaws, and it's just a pathetic mess, I think, that, and they're for the federal senior levels of government that have all the brain power there to roll this out this way and make us, wonder if we should do a bylaw to protect against whatever, and it's just my personal opinion is I'm not a big fan of it anyway. So,
if I may. I agree that it's very complicated, and there's some issues with respect to how it's been handled at the other levels of government. The concern from a municipal perspective, I would think, would be that not having a bylaw in place, especially over the summer when the opportunity to implement a bylaw isn't really there with the council schedule, that might prove difficult if what ultimately comes out of the federal provincial government is that it is the municipality's responsibility to regulate, and the opportunity to do so might not exist until September or later at that point. The recommendation with respect to the bylaw for regulating consumption is essentially a fairly restrictive one to keep consumption on private property at this time. Administratively, it's typically a simpler process to have stricter regulations in place and to ease those regulations over time than it is to do the opposite. So from that perspective, it may be advantageous to begin with a bylaw that limits consumption to private property and then to address the issue going forward over a period of time as the rules become clearer.
Councillor Holm and then Councillor Avery.
I think you've taken words right out of my mouth. That's kind of the direction that I was going to go is if we don't have a bylaw in place and we don't meet from July, help me, 9th until September 4th, federally and provincially things could happen in between time. So I believe that we have to put a bylaw in place at this time, and we can always, as you say, we can massage it come September or whenever all of this comes through and we find out what all the federal bylaws or federal legislation and provincial legislation is. But for now, I do believe we have to have this bylaw in place to keep it a little bit of a handle on it in case something happens while we're not meeting.
And then Councillor Avery.
Thank you, Worship. I would like administration to find out if there's no bylaw, if it's no, because previously my previous job, I know there was fireworks put into acts and into code, and if municipalities did not have a bylaw for them, it was no, you could not set off fireworks within that municipality or in that community. So why wouldn't this be the same if there is no bylaw? It would be no, because I don't want to react to something that we really don't have an answer to yet.
If I may, Mr. Chair, we can always draft the bylaw. It wouldn't even be ready for first reading until the 25th meeting, and at that point we'll have, well, hopefully have clearer answers on some of the questions that have been asked today.
Okay, well, to me, it still bothers me that we're going to allow the smoking of marijuana in our town, but we cannot set off firework off in our town. Well, what's more harmful?
A very good discussion. Yeah. So maybe would it be preferential, like I'm seeing merit in being preemptive by having a bylaw, but I also am well informed by Councillor Avery's thoughts of the fact that if it's no, if we don't have a bylaw, then that implies no, and then we have more time. So if sort of do conditionally, if you get an opinion that says answers Councillor Avery's question and it says no bylaw means no consumption, then don't work on that. And that kind of that's sort of the mindset I'm running on. Councillor Pauls.
Spencer, thank you, Mayor. Spencer, are you going to have, by the time July 1 comes around, are you going to have figured out where we're going to sell this stuff?
Through the chair to Councillor Pauls, and not likely by July 1st. We were kind of aligning the engagement process and summarizing that, okay, and having that discussion with Council for the 25th, which means we would have a bylaw ready for the last meeting in July before Council break.
Okay, and there won't be any retail part on that bylaw?
That has yet to be determined.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, Councillor Simpson.
Just with the courses I've taken, the one thing with Councillor Avery's, just can you double check too that if we didn't have a bylaw, it was a no, just to make sure we're okay on that, because I was told that if you make it a dry zone or you don't allow it, that we could have repercussions from it. So I just want to make sure that, you know, by doing it, all things are covered that way.
Definitely.
Thanks.
Okay, so I believe you did put a motion forward to direct the administration to draft the bylaw.
And then also maybe add Councillor Avery's concerns in with also making sure that if there was a no bylaw, that it was covered both ways.
So for clarity, I think, so Councillor Simpson moves to direct the administration to draft the bylaw with use of marijuana on private property. Do you want it indoors, or I think the most restrictive as possible if you're going to direct anything.
I would do indoors, but I don't know how easy that's to regulate private property on the outdoors. I don't know, are we just going to say, you would know better than I would, how hard is it going to be to regulate if somebody's smoking outside their house or inside?
Well, it's going to be onerous either way, right? I mean, the city of Calgary has drafted the same type of bylaw with smoke, private property indoors.
Then let's keep it indoors for now.
So that's what you want, So this is your motion. I'm just trying to make sure we have clarity around it. So you moved to direct the administration to draft the bylaw allowing consumption on private property indoors only, with the provision that if you get an opinion that says that we don't have a bylaw, that there's no consumption. Okay?
Okay.
Is that clear as mud? Feels like I've been smoking marijuana already. Okay, all right. So we have that motion by Councillor Simpson, and I'll call the question unless there's any question. All in favor? And opposed? Good. Many more interesting conversations ahead, I'm sure. All right. Well, Henry, you're now for some levity. We'll entertain the link pathway presentation. Sorry that we're a little bit late. I want to welcome one of Coaldale's newest citizens, Henry Duvey. We thought we'd test out his love for Coaldale by depriving him of water and that for the first couple of weeks.
I think it's a little bit different. Yeah, I'm not sure. I did massage it a little bit after the fact. So.
I got it especially put out.
Yeah. Thank you. All right. Your initial report to council was in our agenda package, so.
I just said to Roger, I think it might be a little bit different, but I'm not sure. Maybe it's not. I just wasn't sure. I know I was playing with it a little bit later. So if there's any additions, then it'll be current. So, okay. Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor and council, for this opportunity to come before this esteemed group and give an update on where we're at with the pathway. I guess this is probably, there has been some progress since I last reported to council here, but there's also some new councillors since, so this also is for the benefit of the new councillors that were not part of the original request and conversation. So I handed out my presentation. And so I'll just go through it, and if there's questions at any time, just it's meant to be a conversation, just as an update. So I'm just offering a bit of background information for the new councillors as to who we are and why we are. We are a volunteer group that has been working very hard to link the communities of Coaldale and the city of Lethbridge through Lethbridge County along the SMRID canal with a multi-use walking, running, biking, and maintenance pathway. This will be a cross-country pathway that will allow families to enjoy the opportunity to get out and enjoy the countryside in a safe environment away from main roads and traffic. This linked pathway will also offer opportunity for storyboards telling the story of agriculture and how agriculture fits into the mosaic and fabric of southern Alberta. And it can be more than agriculture. I mean, agriculture is, because it goes through the country, so agriculture is a big part of it. This pathway also fits into the whole concept of increased health and wellness for society by giving more opportunity to enhance an active lifestyle culture. Converting existing or abandoned infrastructure such as canal banks and rail beds is a very efficient means of investing in the community. Converting a canal bank to a pathway requires minimal public investment compared to other infrastructure projects. The AUMA adopted a resolution at their 2017 conference, which states, "It is therefore resolved that the Alberta urban municipalities urge the government of Alberta to provide support and funding to complete non-motorized trail linkages between urban municipalities." And we think this fits perfectly into that resolution. And this could be, you know, the model project, so to speak, since this resolution, and presumably AUMA is lobbying the government right presently to see that this goes forward. These non-motorized linkages would always be through rural Alberta, so it means more collaboration from all municipalities and jurisdictions. The Link Society agrees with the Rails to Trails Conservatory idea, which is an American conservatory that advocates for converting trails, rail beds, and other unused public spaces to pathways. Greenways are often seen narrowly when it comes to their benefit. People tend to focus on the recreational or environmental aspect of trails and greenways, failing to see the big picture. The total package of benefits that a trail greenway can provide to communities, including public health, economic and transportation benefits, and even the effect on community pride and identity. And we haven't even leveraged the idea of carbon, the fact that every bicycle would replace however many tons of carbon out of the atmosphere. We have received unanimous support and endorsement from all 4 jurisdictions that are involved, and we consider you as partners. The Link has received financial commitment from the town of Coaldale, and we thank you for that commitment. The city of Lethbridge, and we'll make presentation to them as well. SMRD has committed all the land necessary for the pathway along the South Coaldale lateral. That's the same lateral that runs, that ends up running through Land O'Lakes Golf Course and feeds water to the east side of Coaldale. Lethbridge County has agreed to carry the liability and maintain the pathway as part of the Ag Service Board ongoing commitment to parks maintenance once the pathway is constructed. We have also received significant in-kind contributions from MPE Engineering, Alvin Reinhardt Fritz Architect, Edwards Land Services. All of these in-kind contributions have allowed the Link Society to apply for $1.5 million in matching grants. The $1 million grant application is a CFEP grant application with its intended purpose to build communities through collaboration. The second grant that we have applied for is a special community project from Alberta Transportation. The intended purpose of that grant is to help communities with a specific project that enhances the livability of the community. The Jail Road crossing is a very important piece in order for the pathway to remain safe and off major roadways. Alberta Transportation has indicated they would likely not approve, and I say likely, I should just say they would not approve a level crossing at the Jail Road, but would endorse a tunnel crossing through the Jail Road, and that Jail Road crossing is estimated to be in that $500,000 range. And we think that crossing is that special project that fits into the needs of the community. We have also been in conversation with numerous businesses from within that have indicated their desire to be a part of this great project. Precast Concrete, who would provide the tunnel that would cross the jail road. Dennis Dirt Works, Osatera, and both those companies are working very hard right now on the Malloy Drain project. So they have, they have some good work and some exposure to this area. Infinity Paving and Southern, what are they called? SCL. Anyways, they're a construction company, but also we've talked to them as well. And they are also prepared to work with the Pathway Society to build, Silver Ridge Construction is the one, to build a link pathway into fruition. As well, Western Tractor has indicated that they want to be a sponsor of this great project. And we now have a marketing and fundraising coordinator in place. We will be using social media and all media outlets to help raise awareness and interest in this project. This pathway is a community legacy project that only comes along once in a lifetime, where municipal leaders, corporations, interested businesses, as well as the public will be working together to build a linkage involving 4 municipal jurisdictions, building a pathway that promotes the culture of healthy communities by giving more opportunities to families and individuals to be involved in outdoor activity. This is a model of collaboration and speaks to the vision of the leaders in all 4 of these municipalities. We are now preparing for our public launch later this summer or fall, and you will certainly all be invited to help celebrate the launch of the Link Regional Pathway. Mr. Chairman, with that, that's my presentation, and I'm here for any questions.
Yeah, thank you. Any questions through to the delegation? Councillor Lloyd?
Once phase 2A of the Malloy Drain is complete, would you be prepared to start like right away? Would it be this year, do you think, or what's your thoughts on that?
Thank you, Councillor Lloyd, so through the chair. We would love to start this year. We would have loved to start, but we see the Malloy Drain project as the initial phase of the pathway. We're still waiting for grant funding to cross the jail road and to implement some of the pathways. So it would link on that. As much as I would like to see it go by this fall, I think next spring is more realistic. But there's engineering that needs to take place. There's so many pieces that need to happen and lots of moving parts yet. But we're working on that. MP, I talked to them last week. They've agreed to do the preliminary engineering for the jail road crossing, which is it's a big piece. So it'll start to identify elevations and what's involved to cross it. And then we can go to, if and when we get the funding, we can go to Alberta Transportation and with a more concrete plan, and then they would start making steps to facilitate road closure.
Thank you, Worship.
Go ahead.
Whereabouts are you planning on starting?
Where?
Yes,
We would start in Coaldale.
in Coaldale.
So it's the pathway would be built east to west, simply because the canal bank is mostly accessible. The last 2 miles from the Howe Road to 43rd Street is on private land. So and we haven't sequestered all that yet, but we will be in conversation with those people as well throughout this summer. There's an area structure plan now, approved area structure plan for Section 26, which is the piece between Howe Road and Federal Research Station lands. And so they'd be willing to, we're assuming they'd be willing. We have talked to them in the past that they would want to incorporate this pathway as part of their development, which would only enhance their community.
Any additional questions? Good. Well, thank you very much for taking time to update Council.
Thank you, and thank you, Council, again for this opportunity, but also for your support of this project, both audibly, endorsement, and also financially. If I may be so bold as to have a quick word with Councillor Chapman on this. You're still chairman of the Highway 3 Twinning Association, I'm assuming. And I just want to make sure that when that highway gets twinned, that they also incorporate a pathway along in the bank of the highway as a connection point. We start to see more and more of that happening. So it's just I just want to remind, as chairman of the Highway 3 Committee, that that stays as a focus as well.
Thank you very much, Mr. Duvey, and through the chair. In fact, interesting you point that out, Henry. I was out at a functional planning study open house in Lumbrick on Saturday, and at the open house there was actually more chatter about pathways than there was about twinning highways. And so people are really passionate about something that's close to them, and pathways seem to be a real linkage for communities, but also for people to enjoy the scenery and the outdoors. So I'll certainly pass that word on to our board, and I know that it's part of the bigger picture in some ways.
Yep, thank you, Council.
Okay, enjoy your bike trip down in the southern U.S. there.
That's right,
Yeah.
thank you.
A motion to receive 5.1 for information. Councillor Pauls, all in favor? Thank you, Henry.
You bet.
All right, and then we have Fire Chief McEwen up next for 6.1.
Thank you, Your Worship, members of council. So I'm here today just to talk about the Community Standards Bylaw and an amendment that I would like to add into that deals with open burning in the annexed land. So in the current bylaw, we don't have anything that deals with open burning outside of a fire pit in a backyard. So in the annexed land, being from Lethbridge County, they've had the privilege of being able to burn on their land in quantities larger than that fit into a fire pit. As fire chief, I'm okay to allow that to continue for a period of time. So we've added that into this bylaw, which is the section 502. That's that exemption, so effective April 1st in the annexed lands only, with the town of Coaldale burning permit approved by myself or designate. Your residents in the annexed land will be allowed to continue to burn as long as they go through the process of getting that burn permit. And I mentioned it in there that we would continue to allow the burning in that annexed area for a period of 3 years. So my reasoning behind that 3-year period is once the town starts to grow and build out into that area, we would no longer let open burning of that magnitude continue. So at that point, they would continue to fall under the current community standards bylaw, which they would still be allowed to have a fire pit, and they'd have to have an approved fire pit. There would be no longer burning of bigger kind of materials in that way. So that's where that 3 years has come from, and that could always change as well too. Another addition to the bylaw would be burning during a fire ban. So just stating in there, once the town declares a fire ban, that all burning permits are canceled and no burning of any kind, including fire pits, is allowed during that time. One other addition is 503, just putting in there the age that someone 18 years of age must be on site of any burning that is taking place. The third amendment to the bylaw deals with fines. The most substantial one there was increasing the burning during a fire ban. We didn't feel that was quite sufficient enough, and to keep in line with Lethbridge County bylaws and their fines, we've increased that. So as for a first offense during a fire ban, would be $500, and increasing from there, $2,500 a second offense and $5,000, which on a third offense. So that is consistent with what Lethbridge County is currently doing. And as you can see, we've just slightly raised the fees across the board for burning infractions. So, my recommendation at this time would be for council to approve the amendments to the Community Standards Bylaw, 725 RO 317, Section 502, 503, and the Schedule A, associated fire penalties.
Any questions through the chief? Councillor Chapman?
Yeah, thank you, Worship, and Chief, thank you so much for doing this follow-up. I heard a bit about this at the barbecue when we had the Welcome to Coaldale barbecue for the new residents, and they seem to have these types of questions about what they can do and what they can't do, and are kind of somewhere concerned about all privileges taken away from them. So in talking with your deputy, it seemed like the natural course of action would be to kind of wean them into a process rather than, you know, no strikes, and you would have to comply immediately. So I think that this kind of gives a buffer zone to some of that process for our new residents. I know that there are some other considerations included in our community standards bylaw that there are questions on that we can address at a later time. One with noise bylaw, noise, and secondly to weeds, and that there's some sections outside of town that have a substantial amount of weeds that we have some control over, but we've never had in the past. But I appreciate the work that you're doing on this part of the community standards bylaw.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor, who was first? I didn't see.
Go ahead, Doreen.
Okay, Councillor Lloyd.
Thanks, Your Worship. So after the 3 years, is that will they automatically go to our bylaws, or will there be a reassessment and maybe possible an extension?
Through to Councillor Lloyd, yes. So there's a possibility of an extension after that 3-year period. We would reevaluate at that point and see where we're at as a town. If we've started to expand out into that area, my recommendation would be to bring them in to cancel all the open burning after that point and just to have fire pits.
Okay, Councillor Holm.
Yeah, that was a very similar question. What I have, I'm not sure that 3 years is sufficient. I believe that it should possibly be at least 5 years. I'm just thinking of those who probably are using the burning the most are the ones that are furthest from town. And when we start looking into the future, they may be 20 years before they're actually incorporated with houses all the way around them. So I would like to see this either extended to 5 years or actually added to the bylaw, that it be revisited in 3 years to add additional time if required.
Okay. Chief, with the 18 years of age stipulation, was that meant to be just with regard to that one item of the open burning, or was that meant to be carried through in any kind of, like the fire pits and stuff like that too? Or
So that was meant to be carried through to all burning in town, including fire pits.
okay, Councillor Chapman.
Thank you, Worship. A couple of questions, Chief. Number one is, this would take effect immediately, whereby landowners who wish to burn would have to apply for a permit, and that permit would be handled through your desks?
So in response to Councillor Chapman's question, that is correct. Currently in Lethbridge County, they have to follow a very similar process where they apply to the county to get a burn permit, and then they get a certain period of time where they're allowed to burn within. So that permit may be good for 2 weeks, and they must burn within that 2 weeks. So to create a very simple like process that the county is currently doing, we've created the Town of Coaldale burning permit, which is fairly close to the same. There's just been a couple changes to that in respect to the town. So the residents will follow a very similar process to what they're already doing. This will be available on the town website and at the fire hall if people choose to stop in and fill it out. It will then, so they fill it out, it gets sent to me. Myself or a designate will approve it, gets sent back to them, and they have their permit number and their time frame, and they're allowed to burn within that, following the criteria that's laid out on the permit.
Thank you. My final question is, with that, you will be sending out informatives to these landowners on these new conditions?
Yes,
Okay.
I would like to send out a package so everyone is aware of what we're doing, yeah,
Okay,
and the
thank you.
process.
So then, Chief, with respect to Councillor Holmes' thoughts around 3 years and 5 years, but have you had any more? Any thought? Or I was just wondering if we just put a period there, burning outside of item 506 period, and this exemption will be examined, will be reviewed prior to April of 2021 or something like that. Would that be sufficient?
I think that would be sufficient. We can revisit that within a period of time that council is happy with, and we could grant an extension where we could end this at that time.
So we just kind of massage it to say that, you know, this exemption will be reviewed prior to April 1st, 2021. Okay. I like that. All right. Spencer, you're in the crowd in that. With this this bylaw and that, should we wait for to hear Christina's presentation and then do all of it all at once, or would that be I think that's the more workable way of doing the amendment, right? In my mind. Yeah. Okay. Can you go ahead?
One of the reasons that we've split up the presentations is so that we know. One of the reasons that we split up the presentations is so that if there was an agreement on one area but there was on another, we could deal with them singularly and then pass the amending bylaw knowing which amendments from each category made the cut, so to speak.
Okay. So we're good with the first set then with that one amendment then, is that right? Okay. All right, now Christina, you're on the hot seat. Hopefully you'll get a good welcome like Chief did.
Thank you, Your Worship and members of the council. I'm just bringing your attention to Section 206 of the Community Standards Bylaw, which oversees the vegetation and weed control. Currently in our bylaw, there is nothing addressing any height restrictions, and cross-reference to the land use bylaw talks specifically about corner lots. Part of our focus this year is being proactive. While we're out there driving around, we've noticed that there are a lot of overhanging trees that are not on corner lots. Currently, we do not have any enforcement with the current bylaw to be able to specifically address those with the property owners. So what we would like to do is have this specific section revised to state the following. This is also easier for residents to reference as well. No owner or occupant of private property shall allow any vegetation overhanging a sidewalk, a boulevard, roadway, or alley, or to reach a height of no less than 3 meters above the sidewalk, boulevard, roadway, or alley. Another instance that we have recently encountered is residents allowing their trees to overgrow into the alley, which prevents us from going into the alleyway and having those alleys regraded. So this amendment will address that as well. The second is the addition of Section G, which essentially mirrors the land use bylaw. Reason for this is, as opposed to having two different bylaws for residents to reference, if they needed this information, they would be able to come to just the one bylaw for it.
Okay, any questions through to Christina? Oh, you're got off lucky, but oh, there you go. Councillor Chapman.
Thank you, Your Worship. I like the direction you're heading with this, and I would support it very much. I also wanted to ask about the weeds because it's part of 206 or control of weeds, and I know that there's been some concerns brought my way about noxious weeds in Coaldale, particularly on the outskirts. And so we don't have a weed inspector per se. The province doesn't have one either. So consequently, noxious weeds have flared up and are, in some cases, impossible to exterminate. So something we need to get a handle on as well is some of the weeds around town. And if you're in the process, and maybe you need to amend the bylaw for that too, if there needs to be.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Chapman. That is one thing that we have also identified since the annexation of the land into Coaldale, is that there is issues with weeds. As you did mention, we do not have anybody on staff that can currently identify what noxious weeds are. This is something that we can look into. I don't have an answer on how we would proceed with that today, other than speaking with the property owner. One thing that we have been doing, like I did mention, is more proactive enforcement in town. So we do issue residents with a grass cutting notice. So again, if those weeds are tall enough, they would more than likely fall within that grass cutting notice as well. chances are there's probably grass in there that's tall as well. We address the property owners that way. They're given a specific timeline in order to bring that property into compliance. If they have not met that due date, then we can go forward with a remedial order. So we can address the weeds from that angle as long as it's, of course, encompassed with the tall grass as well.
Just maybe as an observation of a couple places I have noticed weeds, particularly with Alberta Transportation owned lots across the highway and just over here that are really high. So just a side observation for you.
Yes, thank you. I'm not sure if you're aware, we have split the towns into districts. That would fall under the District 1 officer, who has been very diligently addressing the property owners with those overgrown weeds and grass.
Okay, great. Any other comments or questions through the presenter? Okay, thank you very much. So at this time, what I'd recommend that we approve the amendments, if that's what council so wishes, that were brought forward in items 6.1 and 6.2 with direction to administration to bring back the version of the bylaw to the next meeting, so we can do it, because you have to attach a bylaw number and everything to it should have proper wording to rescind the former bylaw and that. So I think we just need a couple of little finesse items to really formalize. But if we give them direction to amend the bylaw as per today's presentations, then they can bring back.
I would move exactly what you just said.
Okay. All right. So we're gonna, Councillor Holmes moves the changes contained within 6.1 and 6.2 be incorporated into a new bylaw, directing the administration to bring back the bylaw, the formal bylaw, to our next meeting. All in favor? Ken?
Wanted to make a couple of quick introductions. So we got Christina Colley, she's our team lead for the Peace Officer Program. And then we also have Clayton Rutberg, who's our Deputy Chief of Public Safety, taking over for Mark Murphy. So he'll serve as our Director of Emergency Management, as well as oversee the town's Community Peace Officer Program and specialize in fire inspections and investigations. So while we're on live TV, just wanted to embarrass them and introduce them all at the same time. So welcome and thanks for coming.
Clayton was gobsmacked when I told him that it's tradition for them to bring in a 20-minute bio introduction. But so I said, well, given your surprise, we'll let you off the hook this time. All right, so we have 7.1. So Lana has been busy at work on that for us.
So I have a flag and lighting policy presented to you. The lighting portion is an option on there, should council consider that. The policy was specific to when we lower flags, as well as what order they are displayed in at all of our 3 sites, which is the welcome sign, the town of Coaldale, and the cenotaph as well. So they're all consistent in that way, as well as mirroring legislative days that flags are lowered at half-mast, so that it's in a consistent manner. Alternatively, looking down the road, if council should consider a lighting policy that we could, currently our welcome sign has 2 lights that flood onto the welcome sign. So should we want to include lighting that could help portray a group, an organization, an individual in celebration or in honor of them, with only 2 lights right now, it's not really effective. So should council want to consider down the road of maybe increasing that, operations did help me out in the way that they said it would be a minimum $5,000 cost to explore that. Should we want to get really fancy, there's programmable lightings upwards of the $50,000 mark. Because this is not a budgetary item at this time, that I included in my recommendation that council could explore the lighting portion down the road, but keep it in kind of on the back burner for consideration. But for the interim, I have the flag policy that I'm presenting before council today. Anybody has any questions?
Councillor Simpson?
I agree with waiting for the lights. Just when we get decide where all our signs are going to go, I think that's something we can look at with that. So I agree with that portion of it.
Councillor Lloyd?
Thank you, Your Worship. Thanks for all your hard work on this. I go along with you on the lighting, but I'm just not sure whether it would be effective enough on the maple leaf itself. Take, for example, if you wanted to put green lights, I don't think it would be very effective showing on a red maple leaf. Is there another place that we could do it? Have you looked at any other options, or?
Like when you look at the city of Lethbridge, they do theirs as uplighting, like against the building, so
Yeah.
that's a lot more effective. Like when you've seen it, like even from far away, it's really illuminated, and it is a different type of lighting. It's a diode lighting, so, and it has capability to be programmed, so it's actually just a computer program, and they have the capability to put in any color. They can do it like to music. It's pretty fancy, so. But yes, I agree that right now, just those lights like this, it would not be very effective.
A better background would be better? Like what could you use?
Yes, like against a building would be ideal.
Thank you.
Thanks for your work on this, and I would agree that probably, I support your recommendation that we adopt the flag policy and defer discussion about a lighting policy till a future budgetary meeting or more robust discussion about that. Councillor
Yeah,
Holm?
I would move then that we approve the recommendation of the flag, excluding reference to lighting at this time.
We have a motion by Councillor Holm. Any discussion? Councillor Chapman?
Yeah, thank you, Worship. I don't mean to get into the weeds or anything, but I know that just observing flags throughout the district, particularly City Hall and Lethbridge County, they both seem to have a coordinated position. So when you look, one, they both are down, or both are at half mast rather than one jurisdiction not having it. The second thing is I noticed both at the university and at the college that generally for members of the community, of their communities who have passed away, they would lower only the flag of that of the college or the university in light of that person. So I appreciate what you've done with this work.
Thank you.
Okay. And Councillor Lloyd?
Thanks, Your Worship. The flags over there by the welcome sign, it's really cumbersome to lower them half-mast. They have to actually be unbolted, taken down, and then put down. Would there be in the future, would you be able to change the flag poles? I guess that would be a budget item we'd have to look at.
We could add
I don't know, but these over here and the ones at the cenotaph are probably easier to lower, but those are pretty cumbersome.
It is definitely a two-person job when they do that, yes.
Councillor Simpson?
With the half-mast, what you've put in here, I agree with all of that. The only thing, sometimes there's circumstances that, other municipalities put down, and I don't want to be the only municipality that doesn't lower their flag half-mast. So I don't know how we can word that in there somehow, that, any major event within Canada.
I think that's covered by item D, I think, or that under the discretion of the mayor. So. Which I don't necessarily feel comfortable with, but whatever. But no. Okay, so we have Councillor Holmes' motion. Any other discussion? Okay, call a question. All in favor? Okay, that's carried unanimously. Thank you, Lana, for the work put into that.
Thank you.
Okay, and then we have item 7.2. Okay, welcome back, Spencer.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. Again, I'll be brief in my comments. The intersection and the area around 13th Street and 21st Avenue, council and the community know well. Of course, that's the northernmost intersection of the R.A. Baker Schoolyard, the hub, the Millennium Park, and the Main Street area that includes the arena and the pool and a couple of other uses. So as I'm sure members of council have seen, and as is usually the case during pickup and drop-off for students during summer festival events and other times during the year, there can be a lot of activity on either side of that intersection with the school and the play space and the park and the other community facilities. So having had success with the flashing crossing lights on 20th Avenue last year, administration looked at this intersection as a potential site for a second set of, or a third set, I guess, thinking of the 845 crossing flashing lights, but a third set of lights for a what may be considered a critical intersection in Coaldale. So the request before council today would be to allocate the funds requested out of the safety portion of the community grant for the 2018 application year.
I don't know if it's all of the community grant. I think we divided it into separate pools, and it was just that stream of, yeah.
For clarification, it would be the safety infrastructure wing of the photo radar funds,
right,
of which another part is the community grant infrastructure and safety infrastructure.
Right. Just, I wanted to make clear that we weren't taking away money from the community grant portion of that pot. Any questions for dispenser? Councilor Avery?
Thank you, Worship. So just for my clarity, it's going to be on the north side of 21st, correct, on 13th Street? Going right over to the hub?
Lana, could you scroll to the next screen, please?
Okay, so right on the corner, it's not going to be up north of that intersection at all?
That's correct. If I may, through the chair to Councillor Avery, we could put a third light on the northwest corner. That would increase the cost, but the idea being that the northeast corner of the actual school site would generally see more crossing activity east-west than north of that.
Okay, and that, sorry, second question, that kind of goes along with the other set of lights and that pathway that we put by on Main Street, correct? Kind of links the two together?
Yes, correct.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Worship. I'd like to make a motion that we support the funding out of the 1/3 portion of the photo radar for the public safety and the installation of the flashing lights.
Yeah, motion by Councilor Avery. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Okay, that's carried. Thank you, Spencer.
Thank you.
Yeah, and Chief, maybe you can bring Clayton forward as well, and he can give a little bit of a background, not a couple minutes maybe, but.
Worship, members of council, thanks a lot. CAO Hastings kind of stole my thunder a little bit. I was going to get to introducing Clayton, but here we are.
Got excited, sorry.
Yeah. Okay, so just to formally introduce Clayton Rutberg as the town's Deputy Chief of Public Safety. He's also going to be the Director of Emergency Management. So as per the Emergency Management Act, the town shall appoint a Director of Emergency Management. So with that, recommendation number 1, that council appoint Clayton Rutberg, Deputy Fire Chief of Public Safety, as the new Director of Emergency Management for the town of Coaldale.
And maybe, Clayton, would you like to give us just a brief background of?
Yeah, for sure. Thank you, Your Worship and Council. My background is in emergency services, fire, EMS, as well as some emergency management stuff. So I've been in emergency services now for about 15 years with a variety of different communities, about 3 different communities that I've served as everything from firefighter to deputy chief, as well as some emergency management roles throughout those communities.
On behalf of council, I want to welcome you to your new role.
Thank you.
So we have a recommendation by Chief McEwen. Anybody care to sponsor that, or Councillor Simpson moves the recommendation as presented. Any discussion? I'll call the question. All in favor? Yeah, it's carried. Welcome.
Thank you.
All right, then we have 7.4. Yeah, I'm gonna did the report here.
Thank you, Mayor, members of council. So AUMA is coming up in September. Summer's over. So we need to look to plan ahead to book hotel rooms accordingly because they do fill up really fast. So I just need to get the pulse on council on how many hotel rooms that I can plan for you.
Thank you. Okay, and previously there's been discussion about what to do about the attendance at AUMA and that, so leave it, open up the floor. Councillor Lloyd.
Your worship, I won't be able to attend this year.
Okay.
Got national communities in bloom this year in Alberta, so that's where I will be.
Councillor Holm.
I would support the recommendation and make the motion that council send up to 4 representatives, including the mayor, that includes the mayor and the CAO, and 2 council members, and that the 2 council members rotate throughout their term.
Okay. All right, so that's your recommendation, your motion?
That's my motion.
Okay. So we have a motion by Councillor Holm, and that's that covers the balance of the term, right? Okay. Any discussion, Councillor Lloyd?
Can I suggest that we go 3 and 3 just in case one person can't make it the last minute? It's kind of, so at least there'll be 2 people there.
Councillor Holm?
My recommendation already covers that. I'm looking at 4 people going. And if somebody can't make it, then some other council member could go. But I just want to include all members of council, and that it isn't the same people going every single year. And that way, that's why I would request that we add in it be on a rotational basis. And if the 2 that were supposed to go can't make it, then 2 others would.
So then that doesn't preclude that if somebody goes in 2018 and then he or she wouldn't be allowed for 2019, but then if the other people in 2019 weren't able to go, then the same people in 2018 could. Okay, yeah, so just make sure we're clear. Okay. Councillor Simpson, do you have anything or no? Okay, all right. Any more discussion then? Okay.
What about the planning that we did last year? Would we be doing that at a different time then, seeing as how we won't all be there? I found that pretty valuable, strategic planning.
Kellen, I think we have in the plan to do strategic planning, but it wasn't necessarily going to be in tandem with the AUMA convention. Is that right?
That's correct. We did that last year. It worked well because being the start of a new term, we were all at AUMA, but we can plan that separately and hope that everyone can attend for that. And the location and date can be to be determined, but we can separate the 2 on a go-forward basis. Yeah.
Councillor Simpson.
One question I had is last year when we were able to all go to the ministers, one of the reasons that was said is because it makes more of a difference to the ministers. Now, is 4 going to be enough? I guess that's what I'm asking from the previous people. More incumbents, would 4 be enough, or should we be looking at who wants to go?
Well, in my experience, I think the ministers don't necessarily want a dog and pony show. Typically, I mean, the fact that the leadership of the town is there, I don't think they go by the numbers more than just the fact that people are there. Councillor Chapman?
Thank you, Worship, and I do support Councillor Holmes's motion in light of the fact that we could possibly spend more time on other courses or cases whereby we may need to have a delegation to another function or a meeting with the minister or something to that effect, and we could put our resources in that direction. So I certainly feel that, you know, this would be helpful for other directions that we may be taking, including some lobbying effort.
Okay. Any other discussion before I call the question? Okay, so we have Councillor Holmes' motion. I'll call the question. All in favor? Okay, that's carried unanimously. Thank you, Alana.
Thank you.
Then I think item 7.5 is relatively self-explanatory. And so unless there's any questions through the Kate, Councillor Chapman?
I'd be happy to make a motion that we approve the cost of $340 to place a full-color business card sized ad in the Royal Canadian Legion's Military Service Recognition Book for 2018.
Okay. Any discussion? Call the question. All in favor? Okay, that's carried. And then we have the request for the letter of support, SEWA. They're applying for a FCM grant. The proposed wording for the letter is within the package, and in the package there was a change. Councillor Simpson noted a date change, and so that'd be amended by having the right date in there. Any discussion or any questions on that? Okay. Any discussion? Call the question. All in favor? Okay. And then we have item 7.7, and I just wanted to get clarity on that. It's in the morning and that. So then, if people were going to go, does council wish to authorize the per diem that normally attaches to somebody attending? It's just so that there's clear understanding on the accounting of that. Looks like a good course in that. Who all would be interested in going to that with the understanding that it is also, I believe, the same day as our council meeting, so. Councillor Simpson?
With it being available online too, is that at an added cost, or is that something we can just be given to us that we can do it at our own pace at home?
I believe that's just like a Eventbrite, Eventbrite kind of a thing where you register there and these kind of confirm your registration, and I don't believe it's an online offering for the actual information. Councillor Avery, were you?
I just wouldn't mind attending the session on.
Okay. Councillor Chapman?
I may not be able to go, but I was just going to suggest that those who are on emergency management committee or anything like that should probably be the best ones to go, and then our administration would go in the afternoon.
I hope not.
Hope not. We've got a council meeting.
Or the other way around, sorry.
No, the administration's structure for the afternoon, but Councillor Holm?
I would also be available if we need some extra representation, but if Councillor Avery can cover it, I'm good with that too.
Anybody else interested in going? Okay, a motion to authorize Councillor Holm and Councillor Avery to attend, and with the associated per diem attached. Councillor Simpson moves that we send Councillor Avery and home to the session, allow them to attend the sessions and claim the appropriate per diem. All in favor? Any against? Okay, carried. And then Councillor Home, you wanted item 7.8 added?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Just wanted to, we've had this discussion on the table in the past a couple of times on having contracts and RFP reports provided to council for approval. And I just wanted to make sure that it got read into the minutes. Checking through the minutes from our last meeting that we had the discussion, it must have been in camera that we had that discussion because it didn't show up in the minutes, and I couldn't find it in previous minutes on that when this has been brought up. So I just wanted to make sure that move that we actually have administration provide us with copies of contracts and RFP discussions and approvals for council to approve, just like we do with check approvals.
Okay, we have, that's your motion. Any discussion? CEO Hastings?
Just clarification. This is prior to awarding contracts, so council is the approver, or we're including as information the result of tenders or RFPs? Just want to make sure.
I'm fine with it being for information, just like our check runs. We're voting to approve a check run and the checks have all been cashed already, so this would be the same thing. So I don't want to hold up the process. But when somebody on the street asks me, oh, how come ABC got the dog catcher permit and there's other dog catchers in town, I at least have the ability to report back to them that the contract was given, it was open publicly, tendered, and just because your friend didn't put a tender in, that'd be a good reason why they didn't get the contract.
So then your motion is direct the administration to bring back approved contracts or RFPs for council's information, right?
Well, same word. I'd like to use the same wording as we do with the check run. So if it's approval of the check run, then it would be approval of the contract run.
But, you know, it's just a clarity that it's already approved contracts, right? I just don't...
Just approved contracts, yeah. I don't want to, but I want to see all the bid processes and everything else. So if there's 15 people bid, that should be part of the package and the approval process. So that we as council know that the low bid or the approved bid got accepted.
Galen, do you have any?
Yeah, that follows. Like the checks are a summary of expenditures already made. You're approving the end result that's already happened. The same principle would apply with RFPs or, and that doesn't hold us back from a process perspective. We just close the loop from an information perspective. Correct. So transparently it shows here's who bid and here's the end result, and then if people ask, it's right on record. So that's, yeah, that makes sense.
Okay, Councillor Chapman?
Yeah, thank you, Worship. I just was a little interested in your thought process. I think you'd mentioned that you wanted to see once the contracts are closed, that you wanted to, it was almost sounding like you wanted to see all those who had tendered bids as well.
Absolutely, as part of the tender process.
So the
publicly open,
the winning bid plus all the other bids that went in as well.
Correct.
Okay, any other discussion? I'll call the question. All in favor? Okay, and opposed? Councillor Chapman is opposed. Okay. Oh, were you for? You were, okay. Councillor Chapman and Lloyd were opposed. Okay, and then we have item 8.1, the development statistics in the information departmental report. Pretty straightforward. Is there any questions? I guess they'd be through to Spencer if there's any questions. Or Kaylin, Councillor Simpson.
I'll just make a motion to
Receive
receive the
the-
information.
Okay, any discussion? Okay, all in favor? And then we have information items. We have actually we have 11.1, 11.2, and 11.3, but there's action required on 11.2 that we approve the submission of the proposal on the natural play part, which I strongly endorse. That's great. Councillor Simpson?
I'll make the motion to approve the endorsement.
For the natural play park on items 11.2. Councillor Simpson, any discussion? All in favor? Okay, and then with regard to 11.1 and 11.3, a motion to receive for information would be in order if that's Councillor Lloyd moves that they be received for information. Any discussion on either item? All in favor of receiving for information? Okay. Good. All right, and then we have in-camera session. So motion to go in camera, please. Councillor Lloyd, all in favor? And then we'll just have a brief recess and